On the celebrity birthdays and stuff like that, we go to, today being February 28th, we go to the birth date of the Rolling Stone, the former Rolling Stone, and the ominous 27 Club inductee, Brian Jones. Um, for those of you who don't know, the 27 Club is the rock stars that, a big cluster of rock stars that were popular around the same time and all died around the age of 27. So other members, include Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and more recent ones, Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse. So what's the significance of 27? There are some theories. Astrologically, it could be linked to a Saturn return. Saturn is the reaper and the harvester of souls. So I realize that a full Saturn orbit's probably closer to 30 years, maybe 29 and a half years, but I still think that Saturn's approach probably has some sort of significance. Probably Saturn maybe transiting the 12th house of its orbit perhaps maybe has something to do with it. But also in the shadowy fraternities that by now most people know control entertainment from behind the scenes, things like Freemasonry or Rosicrucians or whatever, Illuminati, whatever it is. There's many different Illuminatis. I don't think there's one Illuminati, but I think there's definitely shady organizations that we can just call Illuminati, I suppose. They venerate the number 3 for its Holy Trinity vibration. It's always been a magical number, a very important magical number, a very powerful number in occult circles. And of course the triadic vibration in music, 3 notes making the chord, or your 3-chord song, or so on. But more particularly, the number 33 is very powerful. And that might seem unrelated until you realize that the number 27 is 3 to the power of 3. 3 cubed, or 3 times 3 times 3, that will equal 27. So there's sort of a veiled 33 reference in there, and 33 is a really important Freemasonic number, particularly. I should do a video on it but look up 33 significance Freemasonry. I'm sure there's millions of videos out there that are probably better quality than mine. Now, back to Brian Jones, was a really eccentric, but I think an overlooked talent, and I don't think the Rolling Stones were ever the same band after his death. It seemed like the mystical side of that band vanished in the swimming pool with his demise. His death was probably quite suspicious, as we shall soon see. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it is a murder and not just death by misadventure. But now the birth information that I have is February 28th, 1942 at 7 p.m. in Cheltenham, United Kingdom. I hope I'm saying that right, which puts him as a 9 degrees Pisces. This is mutable water, so this is a deep and complex and mysterious guy. There's no such thing as a typical Pisces. They're all unusual in their own way. I've got 2 boys that are Pisces, and same thing. They're difficult to predict as a breed, I think. Brian Jones had the birth path of 1 for those interested in numerology. Now, this is the leader. This is the instigator. So many assume it was Keith or Mick that were the leader of the band, but it was actually Brian Jones, particularly in the early days, that was the driving force that started the band and whatnot. So he's a Virgo rising, and he had a very, your ascendant always rules your appearance. So he had a very Dionysian, angelic, kind of virginal appearance, very tidy and image conscious. If you see all the pictures, his hair is always done very carefully, combed down, and he was a guy that it didn't seem to smile a lot in his pictures, but I'm sure that was just the image. Now, he was the only blonde of the band, though looking at his chart, he doesn't seem to have a strong sun in it. But he did have a Leo moon, which in and of itself is kind of an alchemical placement. Leo being ruled by the sun, but the moon is really the feminine water influence in a chart. So, his death could almost be symbolized as the sun or sunchild of the Rolling Stones, the sun child setting in water. That's something interesting. True Node is on his ascendant, too. So, I think what you see is his image was very, very important to the outcome of his career, I think. Sun in Pisces in the sixth house, however, uh, sometimes if you're not careful, if it's not well aspected, can symbolize a drug or alcohol dependency, which was certainly true in his case. He got in over his head with drugs and alcohol. Um, Now, Leo moon is in the 11th. Now, the 11th house rules public groups and media and mass movements and things like that. Now, aside from the Beatles, the biggest group of the British invasion was the Rolling Stones, and he was, arguably the leader of the Stones early on in their career anyway. Uh, so Leo moon, definitely wants to control, to be in charge, at least of the personal aspects of things. So that was him. His ego clashes with the other members really put him at odds in the final days. Chiron is right up there in the 11th house conjunct his moon, so that that's the Achilles heel. That's the thing that can probably that was the undoing. Now, of course, with Chiron in the 11th house, your big flaws and and ultimately his undoing and even his death would be a public thing. Everyone would know. So in many ways, he's one of those guys whose death is probably more famous than his life ever was. Much has been written about this sort of thing. Um, Now, a feature that many of these high level performers, people in very famous bands, have is Jupiter on their midheaven. This is big time fame and success, which is going to be big fame and fortune and money. But again, if it's not well aspected, it can also be a curse too. It can lead to incredible indulgences, and it can be too much for a person sometimes to have all that in that part of your chart. Mercury and Venus conjunct in Aquarius in the fifth. So that's a house that's ruled by Leo. And that brings that unique set of musical talents that set not only the band apart from their peers, but him apart from other musicians of that day. Unique musical directions, definitely. Exotic instruments, exotic scales, which probably some of the other members of the band probably thought it might have clashed with the more traditional blues and R&B roots of the rest of the band. But I always really liked what he brought to the band. It was, you never really knew what he was going to do. Like there were certain songs that he played marimba in and things like that. Always, less usual sitars, guitar, mando guitars, things like that. Now he's got a big cluster of planets: Uranus, Mars, and Pluto in the ninth house. So this is the house of religion and foreign cultures and travel. So that big stellium of planets there. Now he did a certain amount of that. He did a lot of travel in his life, particularly to Morocco, as we'll get to in a second. It's funny. As I was looking up things about Brian Jones, I realized there's a hot air balloonist that flew around the world that's from England, who's about almost around his age, named Brian Jones as well. So that's kind of Mars and Uranus in the ninth house as well, isn't it? Kind of strangely synchronistic. It's unrelated anyway. But now back to the Brian of the Stones. When he did travel to Morocco, it was principally to get away from the hectic drug busts of the rest of his bandmates, and he needed to get out of London to get away from this stuff. And while he was there, he produced an album of folk music with African musicians called Jujuka music, which is like a percussive folk music, I guess, which would, to me, that's like the Uranus and Mars conjunction in the ninth house. But now the Pluto, however, that's the death and destruction and transformation. He got in over his head with drugs and LSD and stuff, and he completely unraveled, I guess, around this period of time in his life. And he came back a completely different guy. His relationship fell apart. His psyche was really fractured, and again he started to really, really unravel, causing big damage in the band. So now I've heard theories that Brian was murdered, that in his final days he was a nervous wreck and was really paranoid about strange people in and around his property, like workmen that he doesn't remember hiring, and strange phone calls, things missing and reappearing. And many of these rock stars that were murdered, like John Lennon, have similar stories. Now there's also theories that it's possible that he was offered up as some sort of ritual sacrifice to the satanic forces that run rock music from behind the scenes to move the band into the next decade. I mean, I can't assert that, but it's worth looking into. Now, I don't disbelieve those things. We're starting to learn that the entertainment industry, particularly in the world around us, is a weirder place than we could have imagined. So they seem like they could be plausible. Alex Constantine had a book called The Covert War Against Rock. It's starting to get a little hard to find, but he makes a strong case for that an actual murder of Brian Jones. But now, all those things considered, I don't really see that stuff in his astrological chart the way that I did maybe with George Harrison's attack being in his chart. This was a little, if it's there, it's pretty obscure and I'd have to dig for it, but his astrological chart seems to resemble more of the cover story of his death, and who knows? Who knows if the birth information I have is 100% accurate either, but I'm just going from what I got. Well, I guess, anyway, that's it for now.